Jean Edwards there with that update. Now, more than 220,000 Australians have epilepsy, and for many, the discrimination they face is far worse than actually having the disorder. A new campaign being launched today is hoping to change people's attitudes towards epilepsy. With us now is Professor Mark Cook, the Director of Neuroscience at Melbourne St Vincent's Hospital, and in Sydney we have Rachel Keep, who herself has epilepsy. And thanks to both of you for your time. Professor Keep, I might start with you, just in terms of that perception. 220,000 is a lot. What are the extremes of this disease?
Okay, so epilepsy is very common. It's the second most serious common neurological disease after a stroke. And probably that's not appreciated by the general public, because we think of people with epilepsy as collapsing and convulsing, with shaking and turning blue and so on. But most adults aren't having seizures like that. Most seizures consist of brief blank episodes where people might go off the air for seconds to a minute or two, after which they might be a little confused.
What actually causes it?
Well, almost anything can cause epilepsy, anything that damages the surface of the brain. So there are some genetic causes which are a bit more common in younger people, and in older people, anything which has injured the surface of the brain in any way. So tumours, accidents, injuries, strokes, lots of different things can result in seizures.
Let's go to Rachel. And Rachel, it was when you were in childbirth that you actually sort of became aware that this was something that you actually did have.
Yes, I actually was in actual labour when I had my first seizure. I was 5 centimetres dilated and I just felt funny all of a sudden. Like, I had never had a seizure in my life. And then I just collapsed in front of the nurses and started convulsing. I almost lost my daughter due to it, but I guess now that I'm actually diagnosed, I can actually speak for other people that actually have epilepsy.
How has it changed your life? I mean, that must have been a frightening experience at the time, but what have you had to go through and how has it changed your life?
Oh, it's changed my life dramatically. Like, before I got diagnosed, I wanted to go skydiving, wanted to go bungee jumping, do all those extreme things, and now I can't actually do that because of my epilepsy. I can have a seizure while doing that, and that'll be dangerous for me. I also have 2 small children, so I can't take them swimming. I can't, like, bath them on my own. I always have to have someone there. And basically, my life has changed so much. Like, I'm a regular 22-year-old, and I still want to do regular 22-year-old things, but I can't. I've got to restrict myself.
Professor, is that something that affects a lot of people? Is that the sort of, I guess, the limitation some might see it as that some people have to put on their lives?
It's a really common story, and I'm sure Rachel will agree that the terrible thing is that something that might affect your life for a few minutes a year restricts every moment of your life. It's a terrible condition in that way, and this is made worse by the stigma and discrimination that people suffer, which is a really big problem still.
Rachel, what sort of discrimination have you suffered once you've told people that you now have this condition?
Take, for instance, I was in hospital. I had been sick. I hadn't had my medication for 2 days, and I said to the nurse, look, I haven't had my medication for 2 days. One of my triggers is pain. Can you please go and get some numbing cream or something before you put that needle in? Only because I know as soon as you put that needle in, I'm going to have a seizure. She turned around to me and she basically said, oh, it'll be okay. Nothing to worry about. It's just a needle. And I said, I have epilepsy. She goes, oh, that's okay. She put the needle in and, yeah, she found out the hard way what saying, okay, it's only epilepsy meant. Like, I had a seizure on her, and I hope she learnt from that experience.
But a hard one for you to have to go through. And I guess, too, when you meet your friends, family, people out in the community, how do they respond?
Most of them, like, they freak out in a way. They're like, oh, you have epilepsy. Oh, you got to be careful on what you do. And, yeah, I have restrictions, but that doesn't make me any different to anyone. I know my restrictions. I know what I can and can't do. I'm not going to go and put myself in danger of having an epileptic fit out in public. If I can restrict myself from having an epileptic seizure, I will.
Professor Cook, Rachel there talked about those triggers for her. How important is it for people to learn those triggers and, of course, those around them to learn and understand that in terms of a support mechanism?
Absolutely. I mean, not being understood is, again, almost what everyone says with epilepsy. And recognising the triggers, the most important ones being short of sleep. That's probably the commonest thing. Stress is very common. Lots of things can trigger seizures, and it's important to listen to people and to respond to what they've told you, obviously. It's incredible in this modern age that there's such an awful discrimination against people with this very common condition.
For how many people can it be controlled with medication?
Well, probably 60 or 70% of people are completely controlled with medication. And a lot of people with epilepsy get better from their epilepsy, and this is often forgotten. But at any one time, 1 or 2% of the population are having recurrent seizures. So it's something that most people will deal with in either themselves or someone they know closely during their life.
And Rachel, for you, do you feel you get more confident the more, I guess, you learn to live with this condition?
Yeah, I got heaps of confidence. Like now I know my triggers, and like some of my triggers may not always be that. Like my triggers may differ in the future, but I'll cross that path when I get to it. But sometimes you don't always have, like, we have warnings or something similar to that. Like you can get taste in the mouth, or like I get dizzy spells and ringing in the ears, and I know a seizure's coming on straight away. But sometimes you don't even need that. Like I've had a seizure without any warnings.
Professor Cook, what about this campaign? How are you going to get that message out?
Well, the campaign is really important. This is Epilepsy Awareness Month, and the 26th is Epilepsy Awareness Day. Getting people to talk about it, to recognise it, to understand it a bit better will go a long way. The main reason for the discrimination is people don't understand the condition, which is amazing in this day and age. A lot of people still think it's contagious or a psychiatric condition, or that, you know, they might be injured by dealing with someone with epilepsy, and none of these things are true.
And is there no way to prevent it sort of coming on? Is it one of those things that just, I mean, are there steps that we can all take in our lives to stop it perhaps getting to that point? You talk about sleep and stress.
At the moment, other than through good management of lifestyle, there are no particular ways of stopping epilepsy. That's an area of very active research, though.
All right. Well, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. And Rachel, you too, thank you very much for sharing your story with us this morning.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.